So, are you in the market for a new bike? Have you been curious about the Honda 350 CB RS and want an honest review? Then stick around while I share my real world experience of owning the CB350 RS. And of course, these are simply my observations from my experience, and I'm in no means a bike expert. However, since I've ridden this bike for over 6,000 kilometers now, I think I have a few useful insights that'll help you decide if the new CB is for you. So, let's begin the ride. I had my first bike, the Baby Pulsar 135 LS, for over a decade, and I finally decided to let it go as I've certainly outgrown it. Many people told me for my height and size, I should look at an RE. However, I simply wanted a good, reliable bike, and I wasn't particular about the brand necessarily. Plus, I felt like almost every third bike on the road is a bullet. Having said that, the new Meteor did intrigue me enough to see all the reviews about it and even test ride them. Eventually, of course, I ended up picking the Honda, and here's been the positives of the bike so far. I like the overall understated look of the bike, and it's true that this thing looks better in person than pics or the videos. Trust me. Maybe it's because of the streamlined, slender look and there's nothing bulging out. Either way, the looks of the bike is subjective. And apart from the center compartment, which for some reason seems outdated and off to me, the rest of the bike is eye-catching enough, yet understated. Also, the RS is a bit of a unicorn in the sense it's not common, so it has its own unique road presence. The seating is comfortable and feels natural for a 6-foot guy like myself. In fact, it feels very familiar and somewhat upright to the Baby Pulsar I owned. Certainly, this doesn't have a cruiser-like stance or a very aggressive posture either. It's somewhat of a neutral feeling when you sit on the bike, and it certainly feels right and comfortable overall. One of the major reasons why I fell in love with this bike during the test ride is the sound. That certainly added to the appeal of this bike, and much has been said online about this. I'm not even going to bother to try and record it because it's never the same as when you actually sit on it and turn on that engine. So do check it out yourself. Although here is a small update, the sound over time I notice seems to be more tame and flat now. It's not as bassy as I remember it to be, and some of my friends have said the same thing. I'm not sure why this is the case, but just be wary of that. The build quality, as you can expect from a Honda, is pretty solid, and so far I have no major complaints here. The buttons feel nice, there's a good finishing overall, and I have a pleasant feeling when I get onto this bike. It feels nice and sturdy and solid. Well, talking about the way this bike handles and its performance, let me tell you that it handles like a dream while still giving you somewhat of a big bike feel. It certainly justifies the CB tag as it's easy to use in the city. The engine is smooth, there's an even acceleration, and it's got a perfectly stable chassis under you. So Honda ticked all the boxes here. It certainly doesn't feel underpowered like I feared based on some of the reviews. However, I've not gotten the chance yet to test it on steep climbs with a pillion. I think the second gear can still handle it. The clutch is light, and yes, you'll have to change the gear often, but because the clutch is light, I really don't mind that at all. It doesn't hurt your hands, and also I've not had any heating issues with this bike either. The mileage is something we Indians often care about, and yes, while you buy a 350cc, you may not care about the mileage as well, but I'm happy to note it's given me a fairly decent 34 kilometers in the city, and that is certainly impressive in the poor Bangalore roads and traffic. Now, overall, of course, as you can see, I'm happy about my purchase. I'm happy about this bike. However, it's not a perfect bike. So here are some things you can keep in mind. Now, some of these things, of course, not as major of a con, it's just my observation, and some of them, as you listen to it, could be a deal breaker for you. Let me start with my purchase experience. Going to the showroom, test riding, dealing with the polite salesman, all of that was great. I even got the RS in just a couple of weeks from booking it. However, I was underwhelmed by the whole delivery setup. Let's just say the whole bike handover in a service center didn't feel premium at all. But that's somewhat forgivable. After all, you get an overall great bike. Now here's definitely something I was surprised and a bit disappointed with. I took this bike on a fairly long trip from Bangalore to Mysore, and let me tell you, although the bike handled itself really well in highways because it's stable, it's sturdy, the engine did its job, the ride quality suffered in the sense it could be because of the posture maybe or the seating, but either way, me and my wife had to take a break every 20 minutes or so because our backs everything was hurting at the end of the day, and that to me is definitely a major con. The travel between the first and the second gear I think is too long, and it feels a bit clunky, resulting in many false neutrals. Now, this might not be an issue in all the bikes, I'm not sure, but it certainly is in mine. However, beyond the second gear, it's fairly smooth. But I've heard other people complain about something similar in online reviews as well. But like I said, the rest of the gear is rather swift and smooth. I'm not a big fan of the console overall. I think the navigation is a bit confusing in terms of if you want to look at different types of information. I wish they had given buttons in an easy to access place like on the Highness. I'm not sure why they removed it from the handlebar. Also, the Honda guys themselves told me not to trust the range reading on the bike. Now, this was something I feared before I got the bike, and unfortunately, the light, I must say, is inadequate. Note that the bright headlight by default is set to hit people's faces than the road below. So you'll have to get the service guys to try and point it down. So far, the lights have not given me massive confidence during night rides with all the potholes around. Now, this might not be a huge con, and it could be a fault from my expectation, but I felt there's almost no learning curve for me going from the baby Pulsar to this. Everything seemed a bit too safe and comfortable on the CB350 RS. I think that's because Honda tried a little too hard to probably balance a cruiser and give you that big bite feel versus a scrambler. And in doing so, I think they hit a safe spot and a rather too tame of an experience at the end of the day. Again, this is a very personal thing. This bike is certainly a dirt magnet, and this can be in some ways, I would think, even a deal breaker. So the short fender makes the bike certainly look good, it exposes those great tires, but it also splashes a crazy amount of dirt to the engine. Even just mildly wet soil on the road will make its way up the rider's leg and up the pillion's back as well. And this is not an exaggeration, unfortunately. I'll make a separate video on some of the modifications I've tried in order to address this problem. Managing dirt is certainly a problem, and you'll think twice before taking out the bike, even in mildly wet roads. Honda should have provided an option for a backrest, as the pillion will certainly roll back every time you turn the throttle. I also wish there were more color options for the RS, and while you're paying $10,000 more than the top line of the Highness, it should have certainly come with a charger for the phone. I really don't care about the Bluetooth. So for now, those are my thoughts from my experience with the CB350 RS. Let me know if you want another video on the modifications I've done to address some of these issues. I hope you've picked up some useful insights. Thanks for watching, and do consider dropping a like and a subscribe. Ride safe.